In this video, we talk about how to analyze the background or introduction of an article to characterize the significance and innovation of the conclusions in the article. The first tool we'll talk about is a significance pathway, which is a tool or an exercise we can use to identify why the work is significant. We'll illustrate the significant pathway using a specific example. I recognize you haven't read this article. We'll just walk through an illustration. So the article is Viscoelastic Characterization of Rat Cerebral Cortex and Type 1 Collagen Scaffolds for Central Nervous System Tissue Engineering from the Journal of Mechanical Behavior of Biomedical Materials, Volume 12. So we may ask in this situation then, what does this mean, that whole title, and why do I care? So these questions are generally answered in the significance. So a significance pathway traces how the focus is narrowed to the project in question, which was the one that we barely understood first looking at the title, unless it's our area. So we want to start with why is it an obviously important topic? So in this case, we may need to implant biomaterials in the brain for neural engineering or neural regenerative medicine. These are all things that are explained in the introduction and demonstrated in the introduction using citations, but in this analysis, we are simplifying this down to basically a few sentences instead of many paragraphs. So one might next ask, okay, we're planting these biomaterials, but this paper was about viscoelastic properties, so it's not just enough to know that we need to, that we might implant biomaterials in the brain. We have to ask, why are the mechanical properties important? So the article clarifies that the correct stiffness is important to avoid damage at material-brain interfaces for an implanted material and also to drive cell differentiation and growth because of something called mechanosensing that causes cells to respond to their environment through mechanical signals. So we might next ask, okay, that's why the stiffness is important, but why are the viscoelastic properties important? So this argument, or this in the paper, does not do a great job explaining this. In fact, they say a lot of this stuff hasn't been studied, and so this is where the significance may be in question. But they are clear that brain tissue is viscoelastic, and so if the time-dependent properties are important to prevent damage or control cell function, you would need to match not just the elastic properties, but the viscoelastic properties. And in fact, even if you were only matching elastic, do you match the short-term or the long-term elasticity? So lastly, they're studying collagen scaffolds, so this has to be addressed, and they note that collagen's a common biocompatible biomaterial, and it's been shown to provide flexible biomaterial design, so there's a lot of advantages of it. And all of that together helps explain why it's important to do viscoelastic testing of collagen scaffolds compared to brain tissue. So the second tool is a novelty Venn diagram. So the idea of this is to ask how the work is novel, which is directly saying how are the findings different from the most closely related work. So in the Venn diagram then, we start with what is the specific topic, and a way to do this is to identify overlapping topics that define the question. And these are usually addressed near the end of the introduction, although they might be sort of addressed as we narrow it. So in this case, we notice that we have viscoelastic testing, we have biomaterials for neural applications, and we had collagen scaffolds. And so let's look at this as one possibility, is to pull out these things and look at the intersection of these. So we would then say, does the article describe the most related work on this topic? What is it? So a great way to do this is these individual regions are much too broad to do a complete literature analysis, but considering the 2- and 3-way overlaps may allow us to go down to either a review paper, which tells us that there's a whole body of knowledge on that area, or even a small number of articles. And so in this example, the article noted that brains have been studied for viscoelastic testing. So this area here at the interface of the neural applications in the viscoelastic testing, that there are some papers, they indicate them. They do point out something that they addressed, even within that realm, is that they hadn't fit these with 5-element models. And they describe why this is important later. So they also point out that collagen has been tested for central nervous system applications, again giving citations. So they address this area, that there's some articles in there where collagen is being tested as those, but those articles are not addressing viscoelastic testing of those. Then finally, this really big question where things have not been addressed, where they identify, is they notice that this sort of kind of indentation tile testing that allows you to measure viscoelastic properties together with viscoelastic modeling to try to match mathematically those properties with a model have not been conducted for collagen scaffolds. So this entire overlap that I circled in green is unknown. So by extension, of course, those things have not been compared to those of the brain. To compare the collagen to the brain, even if the brain has been tested in viscoelastic testing like that. So this then clarifies exactly what they're doing that is different from other people, which you may not understand, or you certainly can't get out of just looking at the significance pathway and what the final approach was. So a summary of how to analyze the introduction of an article using these tools is that we can use the significant pathway as a rigorous process to connect between the big picture and the specific work being done by thinking at each point, how do you justify going in that direction? How do you justify the narrowing we do with each step? So there's a justification with each, a significance to each narrowing. The novelty diagram is a rigorous process to identify how the specific work relates to prior work that was already done. That is, what aspects of what they're showing are novel or new. So these together are useful because the introductions have a lot of information, and certainly a lot of the information in them can help you learn about a field. But if you want to analyze what the article is showing, you really want to focus on these processes.